tell us about how you find engaging from the world. You've spoken about some of the challenges of being in a polylingual world. You've done translations, but the world of Indian writing or Anglophone poetry is very different, the publishing world of it, than Indian languages. In fact, in many colleges, it's still true, the vernacular gang is still called with derision the vernies, and so how do we, or how do you as poets see this? How do you engage with poets who write in their natal tongue? And what should or what could be a way forward to, I know it's not something that's going to happen overnight, to get closer, to work together with, to engage more closely? I would love to have both your views very quickly.
Okay, so the one thing I think we can, the good thing about being in India is that I think for all of us, we work with a multilingual consciousness. Most of us know more than one language. We may not know fully well. I mean, we may not be able to read, write, speak, and all of that, but we may understand it. So there's always that consciousness from which we are, most of us, I think, are working, right? And I think early on, I mean, as a poet, I also learned to work with that awareness of all the languages at the back of my head, all the languages that I know at the back of my head, right? So there is that one thing. The other thing is obviously to not think of yourself as this Anglophone poet and as, operating, because then you're confined to a very tiny, it's an annoyingly tiny bubble, I can tell you that, right? I'll be the first to say that, right? So there are like maybe half a dozen poets writing in India in English, and then of that half a dozen, 3 who are getting published by any sort of big publisher who's able to distribute, market, and all of that. The rest are, you're really in that bubble and you're speaking to each other, right? And which is really boring after a while when you think about it, right? So I think it's actually just to sort of get out of that suffocation, if nothing else. It doesn't have to be with noble intent. But I think in order to grow your own craft, in order to expand your context, experiential context, you need to step out of that damn bubble, and you need to engage with poets who write in other languages. And sometimes you may not know all the other languages. That's why translators exist, translations exist. So read poets in translation, read poets in their own languages. I can't, sort of say this often enough. And as a teacher, I think I've sort of tried to do that in all my courses. I mean, even if it's called Indian Writing in English, I always have a large module. I sort of bung in a whole lot of poets who write in non-English languages, who have been translated, right? So I think that's really important. I'm almost evangelical about it, if you like.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I mean, like no poet in India, as great Malayali poet Sachinandandan reminds us. And many, I mean, like, if just look at the body of works of Arundhati Subramaniam, and then you can find the sacredness, This sacredness is not arising out of the purity. I mean, like, that way, there is a resistance to that so-called may I say, I would say now, that Brahmanical purity. I mean, like, that purity is not part of our DNA, perhaps, the way we look at, our works today. So we all speak, through multiple tongues. We have folk tongues, and I said that I live and work across languages, and that's where, the French poet or, Hungarian poets have the difficulty, and this difficulty is almost untranslatable, This is something that most Indian poets, in any language you write, whether you're writing in Tamil, I work, my friends Tamil, Telugu, I have included in my selections, worked very strongly and hard with them. And I find even in Tamil, and Perumal Murugan is here, and TM is here, just met them, and the kind of, language Perumal uses, I mean, it's not that pure Tamil, I mean, something like pure English, or pure Gujarati, So that's where Adivasi, I work with Adivasi languages, Munda, Uraon, etc. My native place, were born and brought up. And this is where those impurities, Ranveer, I mean, like, that has become a new language. And this is where India is heading into. I mean, like, India is becoming different, beyond recognition. I would not reflect more on that because that's not the part of this poetry. But we write within this political environment, the social and cultural environment. India has never ever done that and will never ever do that in a kind of in a kind of authoritarianism in language also. That one language, one land, etc., etc. That's not going to happen, Ranveer. So back here, the mother tongue, you have multiple mother tongues also. Let me remind you and perhaps caution myself that I don't have one mother tongue, I have many mothers, And this is where I remember always when I write Eke Ramanujan that, when you speak to a granny, when you speak to, why women are there, in my poetry? Why in his poetry, women? The father was there, silent behind the wall or maybe behind the door, but the mothers were there and mothers were in the courtyard, backyard, front yard, talking in multiple languages, multiple mother tongues. We have multiple mother tongues.